This is so incredibly frustrating. We've lost all competitiveness. You just have to listen to me. I would have found a different way of managing those issues.
Is a rival the person you race against or the one who is supposed to have your back? For Charles Leclerc, the answer has become terrifyingly clear. His greatest enemy isn't Max Verstappen, it isn't Lando Norris, it's the voice on his radio, the strategist in his own garage. The 2025 Hungarian Grand Prix was meant to be a showcase of his talent. Instead, it became a public execution of his race, orchestrated by his own team, Ferrari. What started as a dream weekend spiraled into a nightmare of baffling decisions and broken trust, all playing out for the world to hear through his explosive radio messages. This wasn't just another bad day for the Scuderia, this was a deep betrayal that has pushed their star driver to the very edge, and the fallout from this race could change the face of the Formula One grid forever. The weekend began with a flash of brilliance. On Saturday, Charles Leclerc had been simply sublime. He wrestled the notoriously tricky SF25 around the tight twisting Hungaroring, extracting every thousandth of a second to seize a magnificent pole position. In Hungary, where overtaking is brutally difficult, qualifying is more than half the battle. He had done the hard part. As the 5 red lights went out on Sunday, he executed the start to perfection, defending his lead into the tight turn 1 and settling into a commanding rhythm. The first stint was a masterclass in race management. He controlled the pace, managed his tires, and kept the charging McLarens at a safe distance. To anyone watching, it looked like a race firmly under his control. But in Formula One, what you see on track is only a fraction of the story. Deep within the Ferrari garage, a storm was brewing. The engineers and strategists on the pit wall, a group perpetually under a microscope, were getting nervous. They saw data they didn't like, a phantom threat they felt the need to react to, and in doing so, they lit the fuse on a bomb that would detonate their own driver's rate. The first crack appeared with a sudden jarring command. The call came with none of the usual preparation or discussion. In pre-race briefings, a clear plan is laid out with pit windows and strategies A, B, and C agreed upon by the driver and the team. This was not part of that plan. Caught completely off guard, Leclerc questioned the call, his voice tight with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. This was far earlier than they had discussed. It made no sense, but the driver must trust the team. He peeled into the pit lane, surrendering the lead and track position. The decision was inexplicable. By pitting so early, Ferrari had voluntarily given up their tire advantage over the McLarens. They were now on an offset strategy, forced to run a much longer second stint on a tire compound that was a complete unknown over that distance. It was a massive, unforced gamble. The worst part wasn't even the strategic error itself, it was the breakdown in communication. Leclerc hadn't been consulted, he was a passenger in his own race, his fate being decided by panic reactions on the pit wall. His radio message immediately after the stop said it all. It wasn't shouting, but the clipped, icy tone of a man realizing he had been left completely in the dark. The trust was already beginning to fray. As the race unfolded, the catastrophic consequences of that first decision became painfully obvious. Leclerc was a sitting duck. The McLarens, running longer on their first set of tires, were now in the perfect position to attack. They had a significant tire life advantage, and they used it mercilessly. Lap after lap, the gap shrunk. Leclerc, pushing his own tires to the limit just to stay ahead, was begging his engineer for information. What were the lap times? What was the strategy? The replies were short, vague, and useless. He was being fed to the wolves, and his own team had opened the cage door. The pressure mounted as Oscar Piastri's McLaren grew larger and larger in his mirrors. He could feel the race slipping through his fingers, not because he lacked pace, but because he'd been placed in an impossible situation. The frustration in his voice was now palpable, the politeness replaced with a raw urgency. He knew what was coming next, and he was powerless to stop it. The team had not only failed to give him a winning strategy, but they had also failed to give him the tools to defend himself. Just when it seemed things couldn't get any worse, Ferrari delivered the ultimate insult. With Piastri swarming all over his gearbox, the call came from the pit wall, "You need to start fuel saving. Lift and coast into the corners." It was a command so baffling, so utterly disconnected from the reality of the race, that it bordered on sabotage. Telling a driver to deliberately slow down while he is desperately trying to defend his position is unthinkable. At a circuit like the Hungaroring, which is all about maintaining rhythm and carrying momentum through the flowing sequences of corners, lifting and coasting is a death sentence for lap time. It shatters a driver's confidence and makes the car feel sluggish and unresponsive. Leclerc's reaction was a mix of disbelief and fury. He questioned the necessity of the call, his voice cracking with desperation. The team's response was cold and robotic, offering no explanation, only target numbers he had to hit. The dialogue was gone. The partnership was broken. This was the moment the trust didn't just fray, it snapped. As he was forced to back off, Piastri sailed past with ease. Soon after, Lando Norris did the same. Leclerc was left stranded, his race in ruins. The emotional dam finally broke. Over the radio, the world heard a driver pushed beyond his limit. The restrained frustration erupted into raw, unfiltered anger. This is extremely frustrating. We've lost all competitiveness. You need to listen to me, he yelled, his voice laced with the pain of betrayal. He felt his feedback from the cockpit. His real-time knowledge of the car and the tires was being completely ignored in favor of flawed computer models. And then came the single word that echoed with the weight of years of frustration. Undrivable. That word was a bombshell. It wasn't a complaint about a mechanical problem. It was a verdict on Ferrari's strategy. He was declaring that the decisions made from the pit wall had rendered his car, the same car that took pole position just 24 hours earlier, completely stripped of its potential. It was a public denouncement of their incompetence. He was no longer just a driver. He was a man witnessing his own team systematically dismantle his chance at victory, and he was taking them down with him, one radio message at a time. For any longtime Formula One fan, this felt painfully familiar. This wasn't a new problem, it was just the latest chapter in a long, tragic book of Ferrari's strategic blunders. The ghosts of races past were swirling around the Hungaroring. Fans remembered Leclerc losing a guaranteed win at his home race in Monaco in 2022 when a chaotic sequence of pit stop calls dropped him from first to fourth. They remembered Silverstone that same year where the team left him out on old, hard tires while pitting his teammate, handing the win to Carlos Sainz and leaving Charles defenseless. Time and time again, the team has found new and creative ways to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. This history is crucial because it gives context to Leclerc's fury. This wasn't an overreaction to one bad race. It was the culmination of years of broken promises and lost opportunities. It was the sound of a man who has repeatedly given his all, only to be let down by the very people who are supposed to be supporting him. The problem isn't the drivers or the car. It's a systemic, deeply ingrained cultural issue at Ferrari that turns potential wins into embarrassing public failures. When the checkered flag finally fell, Leclerc crossed the line a broken man. The radio, which had been electric with his fury just laps earlier, fell silent. There were no post-race pleasantries, no attempts to find positives. There was only a cold, deafening void. Back in the paddock, his body language screamed devastation. He wasn't angry anymore, he was hollowed out. He had done everything right, and it still wasn't enough. What makes this so damaging for Ferrari is not just the lost points or the public embarrassment. It's the visible erosion of their star driver's faith. They have pushed one of the most gifted drivers on the grid to a point where he no longer believes in them. This brings us to the terrifying question for the Tifosi, the loyal fans of Ferrari. Was the 2025 Hungarian Grand Prix the point of no return? A driver's career is short and their loyalty is not infinite. Leclerc's contract is a topic of constant speculation, and you can be damn sure that every other team principal on the grid, from Toto Wolff at Mercedes to Christian Horner at Red Bull, was listening to those radio messages with immense interest. They heard a world-class talent being failed by his team, and they see an opportunity. How many more times can Charles Leclerc watch a victory dissolve into dust because of a bad call from his own pit wall before he decides his future lies elsewhere? Ferrari is playing a dangerous game. They aren't just losing races anymore. They are risking losing the one man who has given them hope for a championship for the past 5 years. And if they don't fix what's broken, they won't just be remembered for another strategic blunder. They'll be remembered as the team that let a generational talent walk away. So as the dust settles on the Hungaroring, the tragic truth is laid bare. Charles Leclerc wasn't beaten by a rival, he was broken by his own team. The 2025 Hungarian Grand Prix will be remembered not for who won, but for what was lost, the last remaining fragments of trust between a star driver and the legendary team he represents. The furious radio calls, the desperate pleas, and that final damning verdict, undrivable, weren't just a momentary lapse. They were the symptoms of a deep-seated disease within Ferrari, a pattern of self-sabotage that has turned potential triumphs into public tragedies time and time again. The question is no longer if Ferrari can fix their strategy, but if they can fix a shattered relationship before it's too late. Leclerc has proven he has the talent of a champion, but he cannot fight a war on two fronts, battling both his competitors on track and incompetence on his own pit wall. Every other team on the grid heard those radio messages, and the biggest driver market story is now officially underway. But what do you think? Is this the definitive turning point for Leclerc? Should he cut his losses and seek a future away from the chaos of Maranello? Or is loyalty to the prancing horse a dream worth fighting for, even if it costs him everything? Let us know your verdict in the comments below. And if you want to keep up with every twist in this unfolding F1 drama, make sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because in the world of Ferrari, the next crisis is always just one race away.